Welcome to the Popcorn Innovation Podcast, a special pre-summit conversation series created by Cat Squared and co-branded with Mavens of Manufacturing. I'm Megan Zimba, host of Mavens of Manufacturing, and I'm really excited to help bring a new layer of storytelling to this year's Popcorn, the Innovation Summit presented by Cat Squared, happening August 10th through 13th at Oak Lawn Racing Casino Resort in Hot Springs, Arkansas. For nearly 30 years, Cat Squared has worked with food manufacturers to bring greater clarity, control, and visibility to complex plant floor operations. This year's summit builds on that very foundation by looking at where the industry is headed next. We're setting the stage for the conversations that matter most across food manufacturing right now, which includes connected operations, predictive intelligence, traceability, AI, interoperability, cybersecurity, and the shift from operational complexity to operational clarity. Because the future of food manufacturing is not going to be built by more disconnected dashboards, more isolated systems, or more data nobody knows how to use. It will be built by people, partners, and technologies that connect the dots from farm to fork. Today's conversation is part of that larger story. On this episode of the podcast series, my guest is Deon Engelbrecht, keynote speaker for this year's summit and author of The Digital Theater Problem. Deon is going to help us unpack why so many industrial digital transformation programs underperform and what leaders need to build instead. Hi, Deon. Thank you for joining us for this year's Popcorn Summit podcast. You are actually going to be kicking the event off come August. I've read part of your manuscript already, and I can't read more of it. But before we dive into our conversation, can you just give us a brief introduction of yourself and what your background is?
Hi, Megan. Thank you very much for inviting me. I really value the opportunity to be part of this conversation, and I'm especially looking forward to speaking at the Cat Squared Popcorn Innovation Summit. So my background, I have been in manufacturing environments or in industrial environments for the last 25 years. And during this time, I have implemented many digital transformation projects in companies. And I've had firsthand experience at seeing which ones work and which ones don't. And I think that's where the idea started, is to try and document the difference between projects that fail and projects that are successful.
Mm-hmm. So for leaders in food manufacturing and processing, because that's what Popcorn is actually targeting, why is this such an important distinction?
This distinction really matters because food production and food manufacturing has to be very practical. Food manufacturing and processing plants are not abstract digital environments. They are physical, time-sensitive, quality-sensitive operating environments. Yeah, I mean, the plants have to run, the product has to move, quality has to hold, traceability, very important, has to work. You know, the plant floor is not impressed by buzzwords and, AI and digital transformation. It does not care how good the executive slide deck looked in the boardroom. What it cares about is real improvements. And this is where the digital theater problem matters. A plant can look digital without becoming more capable. Yeah, it can have the dashboards, pilot programs, connected systems, but it can still struggle with the same problems as before. There's still downtime, there's still waste. People are still arguing about whose numbers are right, whose report is right. So the real question after an implementation is, are we easier to operate? Are we easier to trust? And most important, can we operate under pressure? That is a very important part, is that operating when there's pressure. Digital theater looks great in the executive briefing in the boardroom. It looks good, it makes sense. However, as I said earlier, it proves itself during the night shift when the transformation is really tested. If a quality hold picks up, or the person who knows the workaround is on vacation. So, the plant floor is a very, very brutal fact checker. And honestly, I think that's one of the best qualities of the plant floor. It really distinguishes between real transformation and digital theater.
So, can you provide like a specific example? Because one of the main things that I'm seeing in some of the factories that I go to are the big screens, right? So they have these big dashboards that employees can see, they can track their own progress. Is that one of the common signs that a company is performing digital progress instead of building real capability? And if so, what are some of the other signs that a company might be, doing that digital progress part of it, but not really building real capability with all of the investments that they're making in certain technologies?
Yeah, I mean, dashboards are really good. You walk into the plant and even at reception, you see a fancy dashboard, and then you go into the boardroom and there's a big screen, and you walk down to the plant floor, there's more screens there. My first telltale sign is when the conversation starts with the tool or the
Okay.
solution instead of the business problem. When executives say, we're getting AI, or we're getting new dashboards, or we're buying a new platform, but they cannot actually afterwards explain which operation decision they are trying to improve, or what loss they're trying to improve, or risk they're trying to mitigate, or bottleneck that they're trying to improve. This is usually a warning sign for me. It's like walking into a hardware store and buying a really, really expensive drill, and then going home and looking for things to drill. You
Mhm.
know, don't start with a solution. Don't start with the tool. Start with the problem you are trying to solve. Another example is when you measure success by activity. When the go live is a big event, or the dashboard is up as a big event, or the pilot has been completed. But
Mhm.
those are valuable milestones, but they're not proofs that the operation has improved. The go live is not a business outcome. It's just the day everybody starts to find out what was left out of the requirement spec.
Mhm.
The day it goes live, that's when you see what is really going to go wrong and what is missing. I think the third capability, the first sign is when the capability depends on a few heroic people in an organization. If the system only works when a plant manager or an automation engineer or the vendor specialist or somebody who knows how everything fits together is available, that's not a capability. That's a very, very fragile support model who has a group chat. It's a
Mhm.
couple of people holding this thing together, and without them, the system does not exist. Very important to me, and a very good sign is when the ownership after the go live is vague. If you ask who actually owns this process and who's going to manage it, and the answer is, oh, we will figure it out while we go along. That is a big red flag.
Mhm.
These things need to be sorted out before you even start looking at tools. Who's going to look after that process? Who's going to manage it, and who's going to own it? You know,
Mhm.
digital theater, the telltale signs are tools first thinking, activity-based metrics, dependence on heroes, as I said, and weak ownership after launch.
So, based on the activity metrics portion of it, where are you seeing leaders unintentionally rewarding visible activity instead of actual operating improvement, especially within food manufacturing and processing?
It's You see this in when there's more visibility, but
Mhm.
there's no response system connected to this digital activity. If the plant screen shows downtime or yield loss or quality holes, what
Mhm.
is the underlying response system, and what has changed in that response system? What I very often see is that the signals come up, there's a problem, but the maintenance people still get a weak signal or vague work requests. The quality people still do not have the context across the whole process, so they can't see the whole process. Production people are still debating what happened, and supervisors still do depend on tribal knowledge and local knowledge of systems to get around the problem. And this is often when you go back into the plant 6 months later, and the screens are not even switched on because nobody's looking at them and nobody even bothered to switch them on.
Mhm.
This gets interesting because the dashboard may be telling the truth, but the organization has not decided what it does with the truth. If you have a recall, for instance, if there's a recall and you still require a war room, a whole lot of spreadsheets and calling people that are on leave, then the data exists, but the capability is not yet mature. If traceability process depends on finding people and running around with spreadsheets, then your system is just a people dependent treasure hunt.
Is that like a lack of communication now between personnel and departments? So as you mentioned, there's been dashboards not switched on. Is it just, investing in what's shiny and new and then not having the buy-in of your employees and giving them the appropriate walkthrough or onboarding? Like how
we could do a whole podcast just on that question. There are so many failures in that.
Mhm.
I can give you a good example of that is where I visited a plant a couple of months after the implementation, and while I was in the meeting, somebody burst in and said, "Look, it's really important. That's a specific report that a specific vendor in the poultry industry needs. I'm sorry, the customer needs, and everybody will know which report this is." And people were saying, this guy's not here today. I don't have his figures. We can't do the report. And I said, but the report is in the system. I specifically put it in there for you so you could just select the batch and then print this report. I then asked the guy to log into his system and he couldn't remember his password. So I had to go in as an administrator, reset his password, get him to, and then take him in and show him where this report was. I said, all you have to do is click which batch, click the batch, there's the report, print the report, and send it. It's in the right format. I set it up exactly as the customer wanted it. And then I remembered that when we did the handover meeting, when we did the meeting with the people and showed them how the system worked, this specific plant manager came in, he sat down for about 5 minutes, his phone rang, he got up, left, and never came back. Why executive buy-in is a problem, and again, deciding why you are implementing this and what you are trying to achieve and what does success look like before you even start looking at which tools you want to use or which solution you want to get.
Mm-hmm. So with companies that may have like a multi-site environment and they look into a platform, a branded platform, and they decide, okay, we're going to launch it at our first site. We're going to do the pilot at site A. Okay. And then it's successful. And then they think, okay, we're going to be able to do this at all of our other sites. But sometimes it's not as successful doing a multi-site launch. So why do first site successes sometimes create this false confidence within companies, and what should they do, when things might start falling apart? Where do they need to look back and figure out, okay, we have to maybe rethink this and this?
If I can, let me just take a step back here, and this could be a podcast on its own as well. And this this is one of my probably where the biggest problem starts. And this, as you asked earlier, where does it start? I think it
Mhm.
starts at the selection process. Firstly, as I said earlier, they don't have a business problem in mind or a clear enough defined business problem. So, and I've seen this 90% of plants that I've done implementations in is you get a call from from a new plant, and they
Mhm.
can you come and do a demo for us? If you're lucky, they might say, well, we'd like to look at our downtime and our quality and our traceability. And at least you've got some idea of what you're doing. But you go in, you've got your demo set up, you've got your slide deck, and you do a great presentation. And people get really excited about the features and functions that you are showing. And
Mhm.
instead of relating that back to what the problems they're trying to solve, that demo suddenly becomes the architecture for the proof of concept. Everybody wants it. And the decision goes to how quickly can we get this, and not to what is it we're trying to solve. They go, oh, that's nice. Oh, we really like that. Yes, we want that. And then the proof of concept or the pilot suddenly becomes your demo. Now, it's really easy for me to go and roll out a proof of concept if it's exactly like my demo was, because there's nothing really fancy to set up there. You can see it. There's already a weakness there. I'm in control. As the vendor, I'm in control. But I don't want to be in control because I want to solve your problems. And I want you to tell me what to do, not me, not my demo becoming the architecture of this proof of concept. So, you know, so that's where we start. Now people are getting excited about the features and functions that I showed in the demo. Nobody's thinking about a business problem. And then when I give it to you, you don't know what to do with it. So
Mhm.
to come back to your questions, in a perfect world, a customer would have given me a requirement spec and told me that they want to improve this process, they want to reduce downtime, they want to know downtime by category points, value of loss of down attributed to the downtime, and how much of the shift time does that downtime, and they want them sorted by most expensive first down to least expensive, because that's so. What happens is now we do the proof of concept, and guess what? There's a lot of management attention there. They've selected their best plant with their strongest plant manager, and we've got the strongest vendor team there to put this in, because this is going to be make or break for us. And as a vendor, you're in a competitive situation as well. So
Mhm.
you're competing with other vendors. So you want to look good. So the pilot plant gets the strongest plant manager, the best engineer, the cleanest data. It's got the most mature process, because that's where the company strives to be. Is they want all their plants to be like this, the best plant, and it's usually the newest plant as well. It has new automation infrastructure. It's got new machines. All the attention is there from everybody, and
Mhm.
the pilot goes in, and it works fantastic. It doesn't mean that first site success was a fake, but it's not very valuable. The problem is assuming that first plant proved repeatability. People should question why did this work? Did it work because the operating model was strong, or did it work because the process was clear and the definitions were clear and the support model was repeatable? Or did it work because exceptional people compensated for weak structure? This decision is really important. It's like when you bake pancakes. The first one you bake, you take your time and you get it really right. But you know, can you do the whole batch like that? It doesn't always work, because when you go down the line to the plants that are not as modern and don't have new equipment and different setups, and you often find that terminology does not translate to each plant. The older plants do things differently than the new modern plant because they don't have the specific equipment. Rolling that first success out to the second plant can become problematic because they use different terminology, they do quality checks at different stations, and you don't have 2, 3, 4 versions of the same truth.
Right. So before scaling a pilot from one plant to another one, leaders should really ask what's the differences and similarities between the layouts and the setups of each place. If there's going to be any difference in connecting newer machinery with legacy machinery, are there going to be any barriers or obstacles in terms of employee buy-in? Are there any other questions that I missed that leaders should consider when they're looking at vendors and trying to pick the best pilot program for them?
Yeah, I mean, a pilot, a proof of concept should not be vendor-led. The vendor should not just come in and put the system up and give you nice visibility. A pilot is where you test not only the vendor product, but your own system. Make sure your system is up to scratch to achieve what you want. Make sure, the first thing is to make sure and prove that this is the solution to your business problem. And you have to know before you go into the pilot, what will success look like? And then what are we going to learn about the workflow requirements? How do we map these workflows, and how do we map these workflows at other plants? Very important, data definitions. What does downtime mean? What does a hold mean? Because a hold at one plant might not mean the same in another plant. And classifying events, some plants call a hold or a downtime. They will call when the conveyors are running but no products coming through. They'll call that downtime. Another plant will call it downtime when the conveyors actually stop and nothing is moving across. Others would use defective product as downtime. So you got 3 different meanings for the same word. And if you put it in a dashboard under downtime, some plants are going to look terrible and some plants are going to look good. And sometimes the one that looks good is not the one that's actually has the least downtime, because it's just the way downtime is being measured. So you're not comparing apples against apples across your plant. A very important thing as well is to ascertain which part of the design of this proof of concept is standard and which parts are local variations. And that is key. What are the local variations? And can we get them? I mean, ideally you want, little plants that all look the same, like those all the Russian dolls. You open up, you take a little one out, and they all look the same, across the same features and functions. And, once you've done your proof of concept, can the next site run without this extraordinary vendor support and project team support? Cybersecurity, is the cybersecurity in place? I mean, is the supply access and the support ownership clear? Who's going to have access to the system? And then something that is really important is, what decision would make you pause, redesign, or stop? A proof of concept can't only have an accelerator, it has to have brakes as well. And you should know when to stop the process, when you know when you're not ready to roll this out. Scale means controlled repetition. It's controlled. We know what we're doing. We know what we get in. Confusion scales extremely well, sadly. It's one of the most scalable things in the industry is confusion. And if you scale confusion, all you're getting is confusion at enterprise scale.
Yeah. And chaos.
Chaos at enterprise scale. You're just expanding your chaos.
Yeah. Well, as I was skimming through your manuscript, one of the things that caught my eye is your distinction of visibility is not necessarily control. And I think some companies, especially companies who are just starting their digital transformation, once they get that visible sense of what their data is, they have this false idea that they have control over everything. So why was it important for you to make that distinction? Like, why does it matter to, I think companies need to understand that just because something's visible, it doesn't necessarily mean they have control over the whole system, right? Is that fair to say?
Sure. And look, visibility is incredibly valuable, but it is not the end. It's the beginning. It's better to have screens up where you can see stuff than people running around with pieces of paper and clipboards, especially in a food processing environment where there's a lot of water around. I've seen it 100 times when a guy walks around the clipboard and there's a splash on his clipboard and you can't see anything on that clipboard and he has to go do and redo it. Where now you've got it up on screens, it's there, it's real. And there's a lot of value in that visibility. But, visibility tells you what's happening. Control changes what happens next. What do we do when the dashboard shows downtime? Or what do we do when there's a yield loss or a quality trend or a maintenance risk? Control means the organization knows who responds, how quickly they respond, what is their level of authority and what decisions can they make, and what is the outcome. And the feedback, most important, is the feedback back into the system. This was the problem. This was our response. This was the result. That needs to feed back so that you learn and the system learns from your response. So when the same problem arises, the system knows this was the issue. That's how we responded. That was the result. And the more of those you build up, especially with AI, the smarter the AI. It's called machine learning. I mean, that's basically what I'm saying. So without the response discipline, visibility just becomes frustrating. People can see the problem more clearer, but the same problem still exists. It's like it tells you the house is on fire, but it doesn't make it the fire department. You just have a very, very clear view of the flames now.
So is there anything that companies can do once they see those visible problems to make their response system better or more accurate?
Yes, it's a response to the problem you have. When there's a downtime incident or a quality incident, who is the person that is going to respond and go and fix that? If the dashboard is showing downtime, but the maintenance prioritization has not changed, then you're not in control. When there's downtime, there needs to be a maintenance prioritization. And you look in companies like power generation, you can't just switch the power generations off, because then you're leaving an area with a blackout. So they need a lot more data to know, how bad is this problem? Can it run until we have time to take one machine offline? Or, how bad is it? Can it run for another couple of days until we can manage to get in there and do maintenance? Escalation is really important. If there's a problem and it needs to be an escalation, if a maintenance guy goes and looks at a line and a motor drive has to be replaced, does he have the authority to stop the line? Who has the authority to stop the line? I mean, as you know, in food processing, the line does not stop. The line must run, especially in poultry, because you have such a low value item that you need volume to be profitable. And if that line stops, you're losing money. So it's a decision that needs to be made, but it needs to be made by somebody that has the authority, and everybody needs to know who that person is, and what the line of authority is. The dashboard is not the failure. The dashboard is showing exactly what it should. It shows the truth, that the organization has not redesigned the work around the truth. The dashboard is a mirror of the company, Sometimes a very expensive mirror, but it's still a mirror. And if you look in the mirror and you see your hair's on fire, the answer is not to buy a higher resolution mirror, It's
Right.
about the fire, It's
Yeah.
it's a simple thing. A dashboard or visibility creates value only when they are connected to change decisions, change routines, and change accountability. And that is why I talk a lot about changing the human factor around this new visibility that you've got. You now have eyes into your system, but you need to change people around it.
Mhm.
If people, and I've seen this, you go into a plant, you set up an operator station, and he has to record downtime reason codes. And after a month, you go back and you analyze the reason codes, and one is a major reason codes, and there's barely any incidences of the others. So then you look on the dashboard, and the one at the top is the one that gets selected. So this operator is running, there's downtime, he's running the fix, and now the system keeps prompting him for information as well. So he just hits the first one. And just to get the machine to stop bothering him so he can get down to fixing the problem. A good solution there is usually to make the first one operator error, then that stops that a bit, that they don't go to that anymore. But it's the system should not slow the operator down or the people on the plant floor. It should empower them, and it should make their work better and easier.
That's why it's so important to have those onboarding conversations. Like, as soon as you're thinking about, okay, this is what we're going to invest in and bring into the plant floor, you have to have those conversations with personnel so that they can understand the why behind it and know that it's not something that's going to take their job away, but actually enhance it and help them be better at it. Because that's a lot of conversation going around now too, especially with the overuse of AI. I always call it the overuse because AI is everywhere now. And that kind of gets into my next question. A lot of companies are under this pressure to do something with AI. And when a processor is considering an AI investment, what should they ask first? I know, like, when we were talking about the pilot programs, they should have a great understanding of the type of data that they want to track and have that business problem that they need to answer. When it's specific to an AI investment, is there something other than those questions they need to ask first, or is it kind of the same thought process?
I think it's the same process. I think the questions are a little different. It's why do you want to do this? You speak to people on plant, they go, oh yeah, we're getting AI. And you go, why? And because we need it. Why do you need it? And they can't tell you. I'm not a big personal fan of AI making decisions.
Okay.
It's depends on the process. I mean, if it's a really blue, red, or green question, and it just needs to make a selection, that's fine. Or I'd prefer AI to improve the decisions that somebody needs to make. And starting with that is talking about which decisions need to improve and why.
Right.
I really feel AI creates so much value if it improves predictions or classifications or prioritization or recommendations, in a workflow. Leaders should ask, which decisions are we trying to make better or earlier or more consistently? People in plants that have been there for a while have this, call it tribal knowledge of how the plant works. And if they see something, they've been there long enough to know that where this happens and what causes it, because they've been there. But you get newer people coming in who don't have that experience, and this is where AI can be really helpful. Or you start a new process which nobody knows, and looking at that problem and showing, AI can show great things, and it can integrate interrogate a massive amount of data in a very short time. It can look at the last 3 years, and it can, look at patterns and come up with these issues only happen on a Friday evening on the night shift at 4 o'clock,
Mhm.
and then you go and look, why is that happening at that time? It just gives you more information, and, the thing about AI is the most important thing about AI is not the algorithm. The most important thing about AI is the data underneath it, and how clean is that data? Is there any data bias in that data? If you just stick it on old data, the plant manager might have had a soft spot for a certain line, and that line got a lot more attention than it should have, or there was a
Mhm.
specific reason they did something because the machine was broken, but that context is not in the data. So they just did it in a certain way because that specific product was closer to the packing robot that was packing it, and that's why it ran down that line. But now they've moved things around, and that data does not exist. But that bias still sits in the data. So when the AI makes the decision, and it's still going to send stuff down that line because that's how you've always done it, and the outcome looked good. So we're sending stuff, and the biasness towards the favorite line of somebody is still going to pick those biases up.
Yeah,
So
that's really interesting.
AI is not fairy dust. You done a messy process, all you get is a very confident mess. I mean, you've seen how confident AI is. You ask it, "Can I swim with sharks?" Yes. Can I swim with great whites? No. But hang on, you said I can swim with sharks, and it's strange how AI is always giving you a positive answer, where
Yeah.
sometimes you just say no, and it.
And before companies invest in any sort of AI, they should check to see if their data is clean, and if there are any biases. Like, who owns that though? Like, where do those conversations need to happen? And if I'm assuming like the executive team, but then are you bringing in the employees on the shop floor with the tribal knowledge? Like, that sounds like a very intense process that would get, probably a little frustrating and stressful.
Absolutely. And yes, there is AI is still too new to sort of fix that. You either
Mhm.
start a blank slate and you build up data, and as you go along, your decisions get better, or you
Okay.
need to eliminate. You know, I've seen cases where they will take that, a production plant with 8 lines, and they go, well, that line has been down for a while, and then it was up. So pick a line that you think has the cleanest data, and then start with that.
Okay.
If these are mirror images of each other, then
Yeah.
some data, sadly, you have to throw it away.
So for food manufacturing, do you have a specific example you can provide where AI actually improved something, like a
Many,
decision or process?
I mean, a lot of there's a lot of good things being done with AI in oil and gas,
Mhm.
on works orders and maintenance and preventative maintenance, and even predictive maintenance. But the oil and gas industry is the leaders on digital technology,
Mhm.
light years ahead of where any other industry is. I mean, coming back to
Mhm.
the food industry, I've seen a lot of successes in the food processing industry when dealing with process drifts of quality, where the issue is not obvious in 1 or 2 or 3 or a week signals, but the patterns still exist across processes, as I was talking about earlier. And AI can very easily identify those patterns, classify them, prioritize which batches need review. It does not need to make the quality decision. That belongs to the people that have that accountability, but it can help the quality production and engineering get to the facts faster. it helps them get to a decision much faster by giving them decision support, giving them the right information. So instead of them spending hours reconstructing what happened, the team can see which signals changed, which batch was affected, what material was involved, whether patterns occurred before, and what decisions need attention now. And that is one of the best places that I've seen AI work. Anywhere where there's, a pattern problem or nothing that's obvious, where somebody needs more context to make a decision before they actually make the decision. I mean, a lot of guys, just due to tribal knowledge or just being there 30 years in the plant, know which decision usually fixes this, but it does not always. So you give that guy more context and more information, I mean, he makes a great decision.
Yeah. Well, and I'm assuming too, with like how things are growing and scaling, even the most experienced guys can get overwhelmed sometimes. So like having that backup during those stressful moments is a huge help. One of the things that you argue is that cybersecurity and governance should not be treated as late stage technical details. Why do you think they belong at the beginning of the transformation planning? Like, I have assumptions, but I just want to.
You know what, Megan? This industry is getting attacked all over the show with cyber. I mean, the problem with cybersecurity, and going back to our previous conversation on AI, is that all these great things we have in AI, pattern recognition, connecting various agents and having these agents talk to each other, not just a guy behind a keyboard. Sadly, that technology is also available to cyber criminals, and they are using it. They are definitely using it to try and break down firewalls, try and get around people's passwords and stuff like that. So, I mean, I would not risk it anymore because, and they are just going to the newspaper and look at which companies, all of them have had some sort of cyber incidents. The reason that it's not so prevalent is it's only listed public companies that have to make it public. Private companies have no obligation to make it public that they've had a cyber incident. And to be honest, they wouldn't, because they don't want their customer base to lose trust in them. They don't want to see as being fragile. So, I just believe that this really belongs at the beginning, because digital transformation changes the operating architecture. Every new connection, every supplier pathway, every new feed into the cloud, every new integration point, remote support and analytics layers, they create more capability, but at the same time, they create more risk. It can't be separate from operations. By the time the system is live, half of the architectural decisions have already been made, and then to come do another round and try and add cybersecurity onto that, it's like leaving home in your car and only putting your seatbelt on when you're doing 70 miles an hour on the freeway. It's good, but it's not the right way to do it. Don't drive for a couple of miles before you put your seatbelt on. And that's sort of seems to be the way of doing it. Is let's get the system in, let's get it working. We don't want cybersecurity to slow us down. Is what I often hear. Or yes, these vendors all need access to the system because this, the database guy is testing the database, and this guy's, so all these people have this access to the system. And is anybody managing that with those permissions and making sure that you close them after the implementation? Does everybody know where do we have open connections? It's really, really difficult. And the same goes for governance. Somebody has to decide which exceptions are acceptable, who owns the supply access, Who approves the architectural changes in the business? And who cares about accountability after go live?
Yeah.
These things have to be designed into the system from the beginning. You cannot leave yourself open anymore, not in today's environment.
Right. Even like with companies who aren't as connected as some other companies might be, they're still experiencing some sort of cyber security breach. It's horrible for some of the smaller businesses out there that are getting affected by it. But in food manufacturing, especially, like that's a vital resource that we all need. And, thinking of like how to take down a society, you're going to go after their water and their food, So it's like you got to think of the bigger picture. And in some cases, it can be a big investment to have it at the beginning of the stage, but it's a way bigger investment trying to correct it after the fact. Like companies who have been hacked into, they have paid so much to get it fixed and resolved. And I don't even think they're still fully resolved in some cases. So definitely agree with you.
There's no guarantee that when you pay the ransom that you're going to get your system back. These are terrorists. I mean, they are criminals. If you pay, we'll switch your system on. And there's a lot of examples of you paid and they did not switch your system back on.
Or they kept you hostage and then turned it off again and asked you for another.
The system just doesn't come back the way it was, And then you have to get people in to come and do penetration testing and find where they got in, and then it's a lot more, as you said, it's more expensive to fix the problem than to sort of start it. And I promise you, it's not, in today's environment, it's not will we get hacked, it's when will we get hacked and how will we respond. That is so important. Just to give you an example, in food processing and poultry processing, if you cannot prove that your product is safe, are you going to ship it? No, you're not. So I don't even have to compromise your product. All I have to compromise is your ability to prove that the food that you are shipping is safe. That's all I have to do. I don't have to compromise your product or anything like that. And, it's a big issue, and companies really need to look at that and get people trained up on don't open emails. We had a situation where there's a whole lot of spam email in your inbox and you just go open, delete, open, delete, open, delete. And somebody in our office got a email, and as she opened it, it installed a much like a Google Meet or a Microsoft Teams sort of that could connect with your system. And she was, although we work in cybersecurity, so she knew about this, and she immediately came to us and said, "Well, something downloaded in my system." We went in, found it, deleted it, and then next day went back and checked, and books it had reinstalled. So not only had it installed the program, it installed the protocol that would reinstall it at a certain time of day if it was not there. So then we had to go in and find out where this thing was, and it took 2 days of being totally disconnected to the outside world to make sure that we cleaned it up and make sure we still go back and check that it hasn't come back. I think the biggest thing, and it's something that you mentioned as well, is that cybersecurity is not an IT issue only. Yes, IT people, the IT department looks after the firewall and they monitor the network activity. But if somebody in the plant opens an email and installs some malware on their system, there's nothing that IT could have done. It is OT people in the plant's responsibility as well. And splitting the plant up and putting barriers in between means you don't lose the whole plant. It means you lose a section of the plant, and then you must have a plan in place to how are we going to run that plant without it being, how are we going to do quality checks on that section of the plant? You just go back to manual. How did you do it before? Just go back to doing it manual. If you segmented your plant in a smart way, so you could lose a section or two sections, but then, be ready to go back to manual as you did before.
Yeah, that's so interesting because we talk about how, we don't want to have these silos anymore. We want things to get connected, but in a sense, you do want to have a silo. In case something does happen, you're able to cut it off and fix it while everything else is running in place. So you got to have some modularity in place, which is interesting. Deon, we are coming up on time, so I just wanted to tap into your presentation a little bit more. Like, what are you hoping attendees take away from your keynote? Like, what are some of the key points you really want to set in with the audience?
I'd just like to leave the, sort of manufacturing leaders, people in food manufacturing, that transformation is not proven when the system goes live. It is proven when the operation can trust it under pressure, in the night shift. And I think the thing that I'm trying to get across is that, vendors like Hasquid can do magic if you work with them. If you know what the problem is you're going to solve, you know what success is going to look like, you know what you're trying to get at, and you're prepared to work with the vendor. I mean, it is amazing what you can achieve. And, using AI correctly and having reworking your processes around the information that is now readily available, it has so much better, and you can really change the plant. And it's not about replacing people. It is about empowering people to do their job better and make better decisions faster. And, and this all shows up in the bottom line. You have less downtime, you make better decisions, you have less friction, people agree with each other, there's less quality issues, and the plant just runs much better. But it's really important, to make sure that your goal is to have, after you've done this, not to have more dashboards or more fancy digital language, but to have a stronger operating capability with better decisions, cleaner accountability, trusted data, safer connectivity, better yield, and just overall a business that is better to run. Yeah. And your plant floor will tell you the truth very quickly. The plant floor is quite rude, it's just extremely honest as well. And
I know, I've been on a couple plant floors, and I love the brashness that some of them have and the non-filters that they carry. I think they're the greatest human beings on the earth because they're just so authentic, and they take pride in the work that they do. And if something goes wrong and someone gets in their way, that's like the worst day for you if you're that person who got in their way. I think the point that, hits on the theme too of the Popcorn Summit, they're trying to help these processors and food manufacturers really take the complexity out of their decision making and provide them more clarity. And I think your talk is really going to help set that. So I want to thank you for joining me today. Is there any last words, anything that you want to conclude on before I let you go?
No, thank you, Megan. Thank you so much. I'm really glad to have this conversation. I really think, I look forward to this Popcorn Summit. At least it's not another digital transformation forum or something. Okay. The popcorn actually seems quite fun. And, knowing Cat Squared, I hope I can in some way just improve the thinking pattern of leaders, just to sit back and think about what you're doing before you do it. And that way you hand the vendor much, giving the vendor the right information and the right direction, they can address the problem you're trying to address and give you a solution. And having conversation and be available to them, so that you make, otherwise you hand the control to your vendor, and then the vendor controls your plant for you. And every time something goes wrong, you have to get the vendor to come back. Own your own plant and own your digital transformation.
Well, Deon, thank you so much again for joining us for this really special series right before the summit. I'm super excited. For anyone tuning in, I'm going to put a QR code up here. Please scan that. We have early bird pricing up until June 30th. So that is right around the corner. And if you're going to attend the event, please say hi to myself or Deon. So thank you again, Deon. I appreciate it. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. And join us next time. We have another great episode coming up. Bye, everyone. Well, that wraps up today's conversation in the Popcorn Podcast series, brought to you by Cat Squared and co-branded with Mavens of Manufacturing. The bigger story here is not just technology. It is how food manufacturers, processors, producers, partners, and operational leaders are working together to connect the dots across the full farm-to-fork lifecycle. Because when data stays disconnected, decisions stay disconnected. And when decisions remain disconnected, operations pay the price in planning, yield, responsiveness, traceability, labor, margin, and trust. This year's summit is designed to bring these conversations into the same room, enabling the industry to move from operational complexity to operational clarity. To learn more or register for the summit, please scan the QR code in the corner and take advantage of that early bird pricing before June 30th.